Duluth, Minnesota. Vertical bar, November 7th, 2024. Vertical bar, 7:19 a.m. In towns like Duluth, murders don't just make headlines, they fracture routine. On Cody Street, where porch lights stay on more out of habit than need, silence isn't unusual. But that morning it stretched too long. The call came in from a neighbor who'd noticed the Abramson house still dark past sunrise. She remembered hearing something around 1 a.m. 4 quick bangs, she told dispatch, but figured it was just someone hunting early in the woods. That assumption vanished when Erin Abramson's SUV remained untouched in the driveway, and her teenage son Jacob hadn't been seen heading to school. When first responders entered the house, they didn't find chaos. No sign of forced entry, no shattered glass or overturned furniture. The scene was too quiet. Erin was seated on the living room couch, head tilted slightly to the side. Her son Jacob lay on the carpet nearby. A Glock 19 rested just inches from his left hand. At first glance, it looked like a domestic tragedy. A son breaks, a mother is killed, then he turns the gun on himself. It wouldn't be the first time. But something about the setup didn't sit right, not with the responding officers, and definitely not with Detective Megan Rourke, who was called in before the coroner even zipped the first bag. The first inconsistency wasn't emotional, it was technical. Blood spatter analysis showed that Erin's gunshot wound, entry on the left temple, exit right, had a linear spray. That meant the bullet was fired from an angle above and in front of her. Jacob, found lying almost perpendicular to her, wouldn't have been in that position if he had fired it. The blood on his shirt lacked the back spatter patterns expected from a shooter at that range. Her watch had stopped at 1:47 a.m., cracked, possibly during a fall. Jacob's phone, found next to him, had last been unlocked at 12:58 a.m. The final message received was from Erin. "Come downstairs, we need to talk." Even more pressing. Jacob's hands tested negative for gunshot residue, GSR. That alone didn't disprove he'd fired the weapon. GSR can be lost with time or wiped away. But when no prints were found on the Glock and partial latents lifted matched someone not in the room, the scene shifted from tragic to suspicious. The forensics team documented the room. No drag marks, no obvious cleanup. But there were signs of intent, positioning that suggested not only staging, but staging done by someone who understood how murder-suicides look. Lividity patterns placed Erin's death after Jacob's, another anomaly. If Jacob had killed her and then himself, the lividity timing should have been reversed. Her blood had pooled evenly. His had already settled, deeper, more congealed. Detective Rourke ordered a sweep of the outside perimeter. A detail officer flagged tire impressions near the side entry, slightly off the main driveway. They were fresh, impressions deep enough to have formed before the frost reformed over them. The tire pattern was consistent with an SUV, not Erin's make or model. The position and depth suggested the vehicle had been parked for at least an hour between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. It didn't match any vehicle registered to the home, nor to the immediate neighbors. The security camera on the house next door might have captured something, but it had gone offline due to a local power surge confirmed in city utility logs around midnight. That camera, positioned to face the road, would have been the only direct visual line. That gap in visibility wasn't just unfortunate, it was suspiciously convenient. The weapon was collected and sent to ballistics. Chain of custody was tight, so were the timelines. But the facts weren't aligning. From a procedural standpoint, the case could no longer be labeled a murder-suicide. The forensic indicators pointed towards something else, something arranged, something that required access, familiarity, and time. Back at the precinct, as Rourke reviewed the initial reports, she noted an item logged in from the couch cushion. A photo strip, torn in half. A family picture. One parent had been ripped from the frame. She didn't recognize the missing face yet, but she would. The tread depth measured 8.4 millimeters, a detail precise enough to rule out any standard sedan or pickup in the neighborhood. Forensic teams collected impressions from the frost-covered soil on the north side of the Abramson residence, just beyond the main driveway. The pattern aligned with a Goodyear Forterra HL, factory standard on mid-2010 S Ford Explorers. This wasn't Erin Abramson's vehicle. Hers, a 2017 Honda CR-V, sat undisturbed in the main driveway, its tires markedly different in both width and tread profile. The track spacing indicated an SUV-class vehicle, wheelbase measuring 112 inches. Whoever parked there hadn't rushed. The frost regeneration around the tire edges suggested the vehicle remained stationary for at least 90 minutes before leaving, likely between 2 o'clock and 3:15 a.m. Duluth PD cross-referenced DMV records within a 5-mile radius. There were 27 Ford Explorers registered in that grid. 9 matched the production year range for that tread design. Door-to-door confirmations followed. 7 vehicles never left their driveways that night, verified by security systems, neighbor statements, and owner cooperation. 1 Explorer was out of state for the week. 1 remained unaccounted for. Anthony Nephew, last registered address in Denfeld, 5 miles east. Detective Megan Rourke reviewed the DMV match sheet against vehicle inspection records. Nephew's Explorer underwent routine service on August 14, 2024 at Denfeld Auto Repair. The shop's log confirmed installation of Goodyear Forterra HL tires, with a note from the mechanic about uneven rear tread wear, passenger side, outer groove shallow by 2 millimeters. The forensic tire analyst flagged that exact asymmetry in the rear passenger imprint outside the Abramson home. The data aligned too cleanly. Sometimes that was the problem. Rourke issued a formal request to the county judge for a search warrant, not only for the Explorer but also for Anthony Nephew's property, including ECU, electronic control unit trip data, and GPS logs. The warrant cleared within 36 hours. The vehicle was seized on site. Visually, the treadwear corroborated forensic impressions. Duluth PD's forensic vehicle examiner pulled the ECU data, revealing ignition cycles and trip duration logs. The Explorer last operated during a 3-hour window between 12:19 a.m. and 3:18 a.m. on the morning of the murders. The ECU trip data synced with the frost timeline established at the crime scene. The vehicle had been stationary for approximately 90 minutes, consistent with the reformed frost layer in the tire tracks. Forensic teams didn't stop there. Cell tower triangulation placed Anthony Nephew's registered phone number moving between 2 sectors, originating near his Denfeld residence, then pinging closer to Cody Street between 1:15 and 3 a.m. The signal drift pattern aligned with a slow-moving vehicle, consistent with the Ford Explorer's trip cycle. While cellular drift zones lack the pinpoint precision of GPS, the triangulation consistency across 3 towers narrowed the movement window to a 1-mile corridor, directly including Aaron Abramson's home. It wasn't an arrest, presence didn't prove intent, but the overlay of vehicle data, tread pattern, and telecom movement couldn't be dismissed. Procedural rules held. Nephew hadn't been contacted. The chain of evidence required fortification before any approach. Rourke flagged a follow-up. The Denfeld auto repair mechanic. The technician's log didn't just record tire maintenance. It also noted a steering alignment issue, a pull to the right. The forensic reconstruction team mapped that same steering deviation in the track angles outside the Abramson home. Each data point layered onto the last. The footprint of the vehicle, the trip cycle of the Explorer, and the drift of the phone, all aligning. But alignment wasn't guilt, not yet. As Rourke signed off on the day's case log, she circled a single note in the margin of the vehicle forensic report. Consistency isn't coincidence, but prove it. The bullet entered Aaron Abramson's skull at a 48-degree downward angle, piercing the left temple and exiting just above her right ear. The path was sharp, controlled, and fatal. Ballistic trajectory reconstruction placed the shooter approximately 5 feet 10 inches above ground level, a height inconsistent with Jacob Nephew's position on the floor. For a teenager seated or kneeling to generate that line, the shot would have deflected or fragmented. This one hadn't. The forensics team used laser trajectory rods and 3D crime scene mapping to plot the line of fire. The path aligned with the standing shooter at the living room entrance, not from the carpet where Jacob's body was found. Jacob's own injury presented its own anomaly. His wound was more irregular, entry at the right side, grazing slightly upward toward the left parietal bone. The trajectory showed a lateral hesitation, suggesting a hand not fully committed or a sudden change in movement. But what stood out was the lack of blood spatter in the direction of the gun's barrel. Normally, suicide shots generate significant backspatter on the shooter's arm, clothing, or floor surface immediately behind them. In this case, the spatter pattern was largely contained to the wall behind Jacob, not on him. Further testing by the State Crime Lab's Trace Evidence Division confirmed there were no blood microdroplets on the inside of Jacob's sleeves. His hoodie had blood transfer, yes, but transfer, not spatter. Transfer patterns appear when someone moves or comes into contact with a bloodied surface. Spatter means impact force. This wasn't that. GSR results already established Jacob's hands tested negative for primer residue. Now his clothing also showed no particulate contamination in areas consistent with firearm discharge. If Jacob had fired the Glock, He did so under conditions that somehow left no forensic trace on his skin or fibers, an almost statistical impossibility. Detective Megan Rourke reviewed the gun's physical report. The Glock 19 used in the shooting was a registered firearm, licensed and re-registered in September 2024 to a male individual previously redacted in the database due to pending mental health evaluation. A subpoena for full record release was filed that same day. The gun's serial number, clearly engraved, matched both crime scenes, Cody Street and eventually what would be discovered on Denfeld. But at this stage, only Cody Street was under review. The fingerprint team submitted a revised latent analysis. Initial processing had overlooked partial ridge detail on the rear slide. The second run, with high-resolution enhancement, isolated a loop pattern with a scar discontinuity, consistent with a healed hand injury. Jacob had no such scar. Aaron's prints didn't match. A third latent, partial and smudged, was found on the magazine. Rourke flagged a curious contradiction in the chain of documentation. The Glock had been licensed despite the owner's documented history of voluntary psychiatric hold in July, following an incident involving domestic threats. The timeline showed only 63 days had passed between that hospitalization and the approval of a new permit. Standard waiting period for individuals with psychiatric history was at least 180 days pending review. She noted the oversight, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. A secondary forensic anomaly emerged when technicians dusted the trigger guard. The print lifted there showed trace-level contamination, lubricant and copper residue consistent with recent handling, not long-term possession. Whoever loaded the magazine and fired the rounds had done so within a window of less than 24 hours prior to the murders. Forensics logged the ammunition lot number, Spear Gold. .9 mm, serial batch tied to a sale at Arrowhead Sporting Goods in Duluth. The buyer on record, redacted due to privacy. A second subpoena was initiated. Still, the evidence wasn't about drama, it was about pattern collapse. The visual scene claimed this was a son who snapped, but Jacob's angle, the blood patterns, his clean hands, and the untainted hoodie said otherwise. The trajectory math said otherwise. In small towns, the murder of a parent by a child doesn't just shock, it destabilizes belief systems. That's why these narratives gain traction fast. But this one didn't hold. Rourke wrote it plainly in her field notes. Too clean, too quiet, too easy to explain. That usually means it's wrong. The forensics kept talking. The body positions, the shot paths, the stain edges, they were louder than any confession. The door was locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry, no tampering with the latch or hinges. Duluth PD officers breached the residence on West 5th Street, Denfeld, just after noon on November 9th, 48 hours after Aaron Abramson and Jacob Nephew were found. This wasn't a welfare check. It was procedural. The connection between Anthony Nephew's vehicle and the crime scene at Cody Street had forced their hand. Inside, the temperature held steady at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, heating still functional. The front room was undisturbed, but past the short hallway in the living room, the stillness broke. Two bodies, Catherine Ramsland seated upright against the far wall, and Oliver Nephew sprawled on the carpet in front of her. Both bore single gunshot wounds to the head. The Glock 19 used in the Cody Street murders lay several feet away, near the base of an end table. Detective Megan Rourke walked the perimeter with the forensic team. Blood patterns weren't chaotic. No defensive wounds. No signs of struggle. The shots were close range and deliberate. Catherine's wound was centered at the forehead, Oliver's at the temple. Neither had moved post-impact. Lividity analysis placed their time of death between 10 p.m. and midnight on November 6th, hours before Aaron and Jacob had died. The sequencing broke the assumed timeline. If this was all one event, the Denfeld scene predated Cody Street. Rourke flagged the thermostat. Settings remained consistent, but power consumption logs from the home's smart meter recorded a temporary spike around 9:47 p.m. The spike corresponded with what forensic analysts recognized as movement within the home, lights on, devices in use, then a sudden drop to baseline. The lock mechanism was dusted. Smudged prints incomplete yielded partials consistent with Anthony Nephew. No prints were found on the inside latch, a common sign of glove use. The carpet beneath Catherine's body showed minimal blood seepage. The clotting rate aligned with the cooling curve of the room, further confirming the early time frame. But the weapon placement complicated the narrative. The Glock had been repositioned, angled deliberately, not dropped. Ballistics matched. Same weapon, same Spear Gold .9 mm rounds. The casing ejection pattern at Denfeld differed from Cody Street. Less spread, closer grouping, consistent with controlled execution shots. Rourke's team pulled environmental swabs. On the kitchen counter, gun oil residue, faint but fresh. On the doorknob, trace elements of copper and zinc, metals consistent with both firearm components and the brass key used to lock the door. The absence of forced entry and the locked interior door raised the same uncomfortable conclusion. The shooter had locked up from within. The electronic control module, ECM, of the home's thermostat system showed one additional anomaly. Manual override commands had been issued remotely through the associated smartphone app. The override occurred at 12:13 a.m., hours after the estimated time of death. Cell tower logs cross-referenced with the smart device's IP address located that override within 3 miles of Cody Street. The weapon's slide and barrel bore cleaning marks inconsistent with standard maintenance. They'd been wiped down hastily, fibers from a cotton polyblend cloth found embedded in the serrations. The victims' bodies were processed. Neither Catherine nor Oliver exhibited GSR. The shooter had fired from close enough to ensure accuracy, but far enough to avoid contamination. The angle of Catherine's shot was direct. The child's was angled downward, no evidence of movement between shots. The killings were sequential, calculated. Back at the station, Rourke reviewed the combined forensic timeline. The Denfeld homicides occurred first, followed by Cody Street. Whoever staged the second scene did so with knowledge of the first. She underlined the key inconsistency: locked interior, override remote. The killer didn't need to escape. They'd planned to return. In a quiet city like Duluth, one murder scene was unusual. Two, connected by the same weapon, the same patterns, that tore at something deeper. This wasn't a moment of rage, it was methodical. And there were still gaps. Rourke could feel them, places where the evidence hadn't caught up yet. The firearm permit approval date read September 5, 2024, 63 days before the first homicide. The Glock 19 registered under Anthony Nephew's name had been cleared for lawful possession, despite a prior 72-hour psychiatric hold initiated that July. This wasn't a clerical oversight buried in stacks of paperwork. It was a system failure, layered and documented. Detective Megan Rourke requested the full permit review file through the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, BCA. She needed the chain of decisions, every timestamp, every signature. What she received confirmed procedural compliance, but defied common sense. The mental health incident report from July detailed a welfare check initiated by Nephew's wife, Catherine Ramsland. She reported Anthony making threats against himself, against political figures, and indirectly against her. "If they try to take this country, I'll take myself and my family first," he'd said. Officers responded, deemed him unstable, and transported him voluntarily to St. Luke's Behavioral Health Center. Medical clearance for discharge came 5 days later, citing temporary delusional ideation, resolved with medication adjustment. Nephew was released with a follow-up appointment and a recommendation for ongoing psychiatric evaluation. Minnesota statute requires a 180-day review window for individuals under recent psychiatric hold before firearm reapplication. Yet the permit approval log showed the process completed in just 19 days after Nephew's release. A flagged entry dated August 26th indicated the mental health hold was categorized as voluntary, triggering a different review standard. Voluntary holds in Minnesota don't automatically prohibit firearm ownership unless a court order is issued. No such order was filed in Nephew's case. His record showed no criminal convictions, no formal history of violence, just a psychiatric flag labeled non-disqualifying. Rourke reviewed the approval officer's logs. The timestamp on Nephew's permit approval entry came at 7:13 p.m., outside standard working hours. The login credential used, Officer ID 4472, assigned to Sergeant Eric Lemke, the senior permit reviewer. Lemke's shift log for that day ended at 4 p.m., no after-hours work documented. The permit entry, though, bore his credentials. The system access log verified his ID logged in remotely, clearing 3 applications, including Nephew's. Rourke flagged the activity and requested Lemke's interview. His statement was procedural. "I cleared 3 permits that night. I don't recall specific cases, but they all passed statutory requirements. Mental health holds aren't automatic disqualifiers unless flagged with a court order. That wasn't the case here." The digital forensic audit of the permit system uncovered an anomaly. The IP address used to log Lemke's approval came not from his assigned work terminal, but from an unregistered device connected via external VPN. This flagged the possibility of credential compromise or manual override. Investigators traced the VPN endpoint to a rented server node in St. Paul, a city over 150 miles south of Duluth. The server company required a subpoena for access logs. Rourke filed it the same day. Beyond the approval anomaly, Rourke reviewed the permit issuance sequence. Nephew picked up his permit from Duluth Police Headquarters on September 12th. Surveillance logs from the HQ security system showed him signing the permit receipt acknowledgement. Steady hands, composed demeanor. He'd waited, filed, and followed protocol. The ammunition purchase tied to the Glock was made on October 19th. Speer Gold .9mm rounds, the same batch used at both crime scenes. Transaction records from Arrowhead Sporting Goods confirmed Nephew as the buyer. His firearm proficiency certification, dated September 29th, cleared him for ownership. Rourke marked the key dates. July 2024, psychiatric hold initiated. August 26, 2024, permit process reopened, flagged as voluntary. September 5, 2024, permit approved. September 12, 2024, permit collected. October 19, 2024, ammunition purchased. No single point in the chain had broken the law. The system followed the letter, not the intent. The forensic data layers, firearm registration, permit timing, digital access logs aligned. Too cleanly. Sometimes that was the problem. In small towns like Duluth, systems aren't designed to catch cracks. They're built on trust. And this one trusted the process. Rourke closed the permit file and scrawled across the cover, "Statute compliant, ethically negligent." The deletion timestamp on Anthony Nephew's social media activity didn't align with the platform's standard auto-archive cycle. That was the first anomaly flagged by the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension's BCA Digital Forensics Unit when they reviewed his Facebook metadata logs. Posts set to Friends Only had been manually archived at 3:14 a.m., November 7th, barely 20 minutes after the Ford Explorer's ECU logged its return ignition cycle at Cody Street. The content of those posts wasn't inflammatory at first glance, mostly political commentary, anti-establishment rhetoric, critiques of national leadership, conspiracy links about election interference. But the metadata trail told a different story. Between October 1st and November 7th, Nephew scheduled 12 posts using the platform's post timer feature, each queued to appear at specific intervals regardless of real-time activity. This wasn't casual venting. This was structured. The last post, a shared image of a dystopian government quote, had gone live at 12:59 a.m. on November 7th, less than an hour before Aaron Abramson's final message to Jacob. "Come downstairs, we need to talk." Investigators pulled device sync logs from Nephew's smartphone and home desktop. The desktop IP aligned with his Denfeld residence until 9:43 p.m. November 6th, when it abruptly disconnected. His smartphone, however, pinged towers across Duluth between 10 p.m. and 3:30 a.m., overlapping both crime scenes. Digital forensic specialists extracted deleted drafts from Nephew's Facebook cache. One stood out, unsent, timestamp 2:47 a.m. If no one listens now, they'll remember what comes next. No post history showed it ever going live, but the metadata confirmed it was composed, saved, then deleted, exactly 33 minutes after the vehicle's ECU logged engine shut off at Cody Street. The BCA also reviewed his search history. October 12, 2024, how to schedule posts Facebook. October 28, 2024, best gloves to avoid GSR. November 2nd, 2024, ballistics patterns murder-suicide. November 5th, 2024, how long lividity sets in. Searches that might seem disconnected until viewed against the forensic timeline. Further analysis revealed encrypted message logs from Telegram, a platform Nephew used sparingly. Messages were wiped before acquisition, but contact metadata remained. 3 outgoing message timestamps between October 30th and November 6th, all to a single, unnamed contact. The receiving device was identified by its IMEI number, but no subscriber information existed. The recipient used a burner phone. Investigators couldn't recover content, but the frequency of the exchanges, concentrated in the week prior to the murders, suggested coordination or pre-event dialogue. Detective Megan Rourke flagged the pattern. Nephew's device remained active at specific intervals, with synchronized posts and metadata shifts that correlated with movement between the crime scenes. His last Facebook login occurred at 3:12 a.m. on November 7th, while the vehicle's departure time from Cody Street was pinned between 3 o'clock and 3:15 a.m. Smart home logs from the Denfeld residence also added weight. The thermostat override at Denfeld happened at 12:13 a.m., but nephew's device location confirmed his absence from the house. The override came from his smartphone, logged on a public Wi-Fi network near Cody Street. It wasn't the content of the posts that mattered, it was the precision of their timing. In towns like Duluth, digital footprints don't just record movements, they map intent. Rourke documented the forensic overlay. October-November, scheduled political posts, gloves, ballistics, lividity. November 6, 10 p.m., 12 a.m., Denfeld homicides. November 7th, 1:47 a.m., 3:15 a.m., Cody Street homicides. Post archived 3:14 a.m. post-event. Forensic timelines don't align this well unless someone's thought it through. She marked her report margin with the question that hadn't left her since the first scene. Was this message for the public or just for himself? The Glock 19 used in both crime scenes showed post-firing cleaning marks inconsistent with standard firearm maintenance protocols. That discovery came from the forensic ballistics unit after the second round of analysis. The initial sweep confirmed weapon function and ballistic match. The second digged deeper. Microscopic examination of the barrel rifling revealed abrasion patterns from improper cleaning implements, likely cotton-based cloth, leaving behind fine fibers lodged between the grooves. Standard nylon or brass brushes weren't used, which meant the cleaning wasn't done to preserve the gun's function, but likely to remove surface-level residue. The cleaning was incomplete. Copper fouling remained in the lands and grooves, layered atop trace blood protein residue, which fluoresced under luminescence testing. This meant the weapon had been fired, wiped down, but not fully decontaminated. Whoever cleaned it was concerned with surface evidence, not internal ballistic integrity. Detective Megan Rourke documented this as another staging pattern, a superficial attempt to obscure forensic links without understanding the depth of forensic protocols. The ammunition analysis added another layer. The Spear Gold .9mm rounds recovered from both the Cody Street and Denfeld scenes were consistent in make and lot number, but a slight difference in primer cup impressions flagged a potential variation. This anomaly led forensic technicians to cross-reference batch manufacturing records from Spear ammunition. The purchase record tied to Arrowhead Sporting Goods in Duluth showed two separate purchases under Anthony Nephew's name. October 19, 2024, 2 boxes, lot hash, GD 945231. November 3, 2024, 1 box, lot hash, GD 945244. Recovered casings from Cody Street matched GD 945244, while Denfeld casings corresponded to GD 945231. The separation of lot numbers implied 2 distinct shooting events, not just in time, but in preparation. Nephew used different batches of ammunition for each scene, further confirming premeditation. Rourke reviewed the chain of custody reports on the Glock. The purchase receipt dated back to 2016, originally bought by Nephew under Minnesota law. No sales or transfer records indicated it changed hands. However, the permit renewal tied to the weapon, approved in September 2024, reclassified it as active after a dormant period. The forensic handling report on the weapon's frame noted micro-scratches near the trigger guard, layered over with recent lubricant application. The scratches were non-uniform, suggesting repeated partial disassembly without proper reassembly tools. Rourke flagged another inconsistency in the ammunition storage evidence. A search of Nephew's Denfeld residence revealed 2 empty boxes, one matching lot, hash GD 945244, but the second box bore no matching purchase record in his transaction history. The unaccounted box, lot hash GD 945249, raised questions of an additional ammunition source. Its contents were gone. The forensic audit of the Arrowhead Sporting Goods inventory system exposed stock control discrepancies. Specifically, lot hash GD 945249 had 3 boxes missing outside recorded sales. Employees confirmed manual stock adjustments around October 30th, but no surveillance footage was available from that date due to routine data cycle wipes. Rourke documented the gaps. She underlined lot inconsistency plus missing ammo in her field report. The system wasn't just failing at the approval level, it was compromised at distribution. The Glock serial number was cross-referenced with national firearms databases. No red flags. But the maintenance history, The partial disassemblies and ammunition lot variances layered the picture. Someone had prepared for this. Not once, but over multiple phases. In towns like Duluth, premeditation doesn't always present as a manifesto. Sometimes, it's copper streaks and mismatched ammo lots. Rourke closed the file with a single note. If you clean a weapon to hide it, you better know how to clean all of it. The investigation's turning point emerged not from a dramatic confession or a sudden breakthrough, but from the meticulous analysis of digital footprints. The forensic team delved into the victims' and suspects' mobile devices, extracting data that painted a vivid picture of their movements and interactions on the night of the incident. The victim's phone activity ceased abruptly at 9:12 p.m., its final signal pinging near the crime scene. In contrast, the suspect's device exhibited an unusual pattern. Typically dormant during evening hours, the phone was active, connecting to various cell towers that traced a path deviating from the suspect's usual routes. This deviation suggested a deliberate detour, aligning with the estimated time of the crime. Simultaneously, vehicle telemetry data provided further insights. The suspect's car, equipped with an onboard diagnostic system, recorded a journey commencing at 8:45 p.m. The route taken was inconsistent with the suspect's stated alibi, instead leading towards the vicinity of the crime scene. Speed fluctuations and abrupt stops logged by the vehicle's system corresponded with timestamps from nearby surveillance cameras. Surveillance footage from establishments along the route corroborated the vehicle's movements. At 9:05 p.m., a camera captured the suspect's car halting near the crime scene. Moments later, a figure matching the suspect's description was seen exiting the vehicle. These visuals, synchronized with digital timestamps, reinforced the timeline constructed from mobile and vehicular data. Integrating these data points, the forensic team reconstructed a comprehensive timeline. The suspect's departure, route, and arrival at the crime scene were meticulously mapped, each element substantiated by multiple sources. This convergence of evidence challenged the suspect's alibi, suggesting premeditation and intent. Beyond the physical evidence, behavioral analysis added depth to the investigation. The suspect's deviation from routine, coupled with the timing of phone inactivity and vehicle movements, indicated a calculated approach. The absence of communication during critical periods further implied a conscious effort to avoid detection. This chapter's findings underscore the power of digital forensics in modern investigations. By weaving together data from various sources, the team unveiled a narrative that not only contradicted the suspect's claims, but also highlighted the deliberate nature of the actions taken. The digital trail, once fragmented and obscure, now formed a coherent story pointing towards culpability. If there's one thing this case taught me, it's that the systems we trust to keep us safe can sometimes miss the warning signs hiding in plain sight. As someone who has followed this case closely, I can't help but reflect on how easily the cracks formed, how a permit approved too quickly, or a digital trail left unchecked can end in tragedy. But here's the truth. We're all part of that system. Our awareness, our voices, they matter. Ask yourself, if you saw the signs, would you speak up? Would you recognize them? I'd love to know what you think. Did this story resonate with you? Leave a comment, share where you're watching from, or even let me know if there's a lesson here that hits home. And if you've made it this far, consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss stories like this. Stories that not only reveal the darkest corners, but also remind us why vigilance, compassion, and action matter.